The first note said, "You cry in your sleep." The second one said, "I liked your blue pajamas better." I moved into apartment 4C on the 4th floor of a quiet building just outside the city. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, cheap, and quiet, which at the time was all I really wanted. I'd just gotten out of a rough breakup and was desperate for a fresh start. The apartment next to mine 4B was empty when I moved in. The super mentioned it had been vacant for months. Previous tenant left in a hurry, he told me. Didn't even take the bed frame. That first week, everything was normal, peaceful, even. I worked from home, made ramen every night, and binged old horror movies to fall asleep. Sometimes I heard creaking footsteps above me, or pipes knocking in the walls, but nothing out of the ordinary for a building this old. Then, one morning, I opened my front door to grab a grocery delivery and saw a single piece of paper on the floor, typed neatly in black ink. I thought it was junk mail until I actually read it. "You cry in your sleep." That was it. No name, no punctuation. Just that one sentence, center-aligned on the page. It unsettled me, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe a friend of my ex trying to mess with me. Still, I locked my door that night and left a light on. 2 days later, I found another note. Same format. This time it said, "I liked your blue pajamas better." That made my stomach drop. I had worn the blue ones 2 nights ago. Last night I wore gray. I checked the peephole obsessively for the next few nights. I even left a small stack of flour on the floor by my door, hoping to catch footprints. Nothing. I never heard anyone come or go. No one delivering the notes, just silence. But they kept appearing, every 3 or 4 days, each note more specific. "You stood in the kitchen for 11 minutes last night. Why didn't you eat? You stared at your reflection for too long. You talked to someone on the phone for 1 hour. Who was she?" They weren't handwritten, always typed. The kind of old-school typewriter print you might see in 80s ransom letters. I brought them to the building manager. He looked genuinely disturbed and said he'd check the cameras. The next day, he knocked on my door with a pale face. He told me that the security camera facing my hallway had stopped recording at 3:12 a.m. Every night, a note appeared and resumed again at 3:17. Perfect 5-minute blackouts. Never happened on any other night. That's when I remembered something the super had said. Apartment 4B had a bed frame still inside. I asked if he had a key. He hesitated, then said he'd show me the place just so I could have peace of mind. We opened 4B together. The room smelled like dust and mildew. It was dark. No furniture except the frame of a twin bed with rusted springs. Empty kitchen. Empty closets. Except in the living room facing the shared wall with my apartment, there was a small table. On it sat an old typewriter. The ribbon was still fresh. A stack of papers rested beside it. Every single note I had received was there, plus more I hadn't seen yet. One said, "He's going to knock soon." Another, "Don't open the door after midnight." I backed away and the super called maintenance to remove the typewriter. He told me he'd change the locks and keep 4B sealed for good. That night I barely slept. I kept thinking about how long those notes had been written in advance and how someone had planned them. The next morning, another note was waiting at my door. "I told you not to let him in." That scared me more than anything. I hadn't let anyone in, at least. I thought I hadn't. I replayed the past day over and over. The only person I'd interacted with was the building manager. He'd come in to show me 4B, but I never saw him again after that day. I called the office. No answer. Walked down to the front desk. A new guy was there, a younger man who said he just started the job a week ago after the last guy quit unexpectedly. I asked what the previous manager looked like. He paused, then said, "Tall guy, wore flannel a lot, real quiet." I nodded. That was him. He frowned. Weird. He never worked in this building. That guy used to manage the place across town. They said he passed away 2 months ago. Heart failure. I don't remember how I got back to my room. My legs just moved. My head spun. I opened the door to my apartment. There, waiting on the floor, was a single typed sheet. "You showed him where you live." I haven't seen a note since, but sometimes around 3:17 a.m., I hear the rusted springs of a twin bed creaking through the wall, and every once in a while my front door handle jiggles gently, like someone's trying to come back in. At 2:47 a.m., I got a phone notification that said, "Motion detected in the living room voice command, lights off," but the audio playback was in my own voice, and I wasn't home. I've always been a bit of a tech addict. The moment smart homes became affordable, I went all in lights, security cameras, voice assistant, locks, thermostat, everything sensed and automated through one sleek interface. It wasn't just convenience, it was control. After my divorce, I moved into a small one-story place outside of Phoenix, fully outfitted with smart tech. The irony is, I wanted the house to feel alive, responding, reactive. I was lonely, and hearing a pleasant female voice greet me when I walked in made the silence more bearable. "Welcome home, Jonathan," she'd say when I unlocked the door. "Would you like your usual lighting scene?" It was small stuff at first. I'd ask it to turn the temperature down, and it would respond, "I'm sorry, I didn't recognize that voice," even though I'd trained the system to respond exclusively to mine. It happened enough that I re-recorded all my voice prompts and re-authenticated everything. Biometrics, voice match, facial ID. Locked down. Just me. That was 2 weeks before things got specific. I was visiting my brother in San Diego for a long weekend. My house was empty. No guests, no pets, no deliveries. Around midnight on Saturday, I got a motion alert from the system. I opened the camera feed, nothing. Just the dim-lit living room, empty, motionless. Figured it was a shadow or the curtains. But then another alert came through. Voice command received. Lights off. The system had heard someone speak. Inside the house, I pulled up the log. The voice command had triggered the assistant to shut off the lights, and the recorded playback was available. I hit play. It was my voice, clear, calm, slightly tired sounding. It said, "Assistant, lights off." And then there was a brief silence, followed by footsteps. Not loud, not hurried, just walking. I froze. My first instinct was that someone had broken in, but the locks hadn't been tampered with. The motion sensors didn't catch anyone entering or leaving, and the voice, it was me. I don't mean it sounded like me. I mean it was the exact tone I use when I'm half awake, like it had been ripped from some past command. But I'd never said that phrase at that time or in that room. I went home the next morning. Everything looked normal. No signs of a break-in, no strange fingerprints, no damage, but I couldn't let it go. I spent hours scrubbing through audio logs, camera footage, and metadata. And then I found something strange hidden inside the archived command files. There were 3 recordings that weren't listed in the daily summaries. All of them had timestamps from the past 2 weeks, and all of them were voice commands issued in my voice while I was asleep or away. One of them said, "Assistant, unlock the back door." Another, "Assistant, disable hallway camera." And the last one, "Assistant, delete previous commands." Except they hadn't been deleted, not completely. The fragments were still cached, buried inside the system logs. I contacted the company that provided the smart home backend. They told me the assistant wasn't capable of deleting logs without direct user access. When I asked if anyone else had logged into the system using my credentials, they said no, only one device had ever controlled the account. Mine. I started to wonder if I'd been sleep-talking, maybe sleepwalking, issuing commands without realizing. So I set up an external camera, completely offline from the smart home system. Just a battery-powered cam pointed at my bed. That night I went to sleep like normal, nervous but curious. In the morning I checked the footage. At 3:12 a.m., my body sat upright in bed. Not slowly, not gradually. Just straight up like a puppet being pulled by strings. I didn't say anything. I didn't move for about a minute. Then I stood up, walked out of frame, and the time stop matched perfectly with a system log entry. Voice command received assistant, disable hallway camera. That's when I stopped using the system. I disconnected everything, ripped the router out, shut off power to the smart hub, went analog lamps, locks, switches. I even started sleeping with my bedroom door locked from the inside. And for a while, that worked. Nothing strange happened. Until last week, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single USB drive. It contained one audio file, labeled only with a date. 2 days from now, the file was short. 8 seconds. It was my voice saying, "Assistant, let him in." At first, I thought the typed notes were just pranks. But then one of them described what I'd eaten for dinner, down to the number of bites I didn't finish, and I live alone, with my blinds always shut. When I moved into apartment 4C, it was meant to be a new beginning. The building was older, brick-faced, and a little worn down, but the rent was low and the neighborhood was quiet. I didn't need much, just a place where no one asked questions. After my dad died and I left everything back in Oregon, I was honestly just grateful to have 4 walls and a lock. The landlord was a soft-spoken older guy named Barry, who handed me the keys and mentioned, almost casually, that the unit next door, 4B, was vacant. "Been that way a while," he said, scratching behind his ear. "Some folks just leave in a hurry." He laughed when he said it, but it didn't feel like a joke. The hallway was dim and narrow, with the kind of carpet that never looks clean, no matter how often it's vacuumed. My apartment was directly across from the stairwell. 4B was to the left of me, and I never heard a sound come from behind its door. No footsteps, no plumbing, no motion. Just dead, undisturbed silence. The notes started showing up in the second week. I found the first one early one morning when I opened my door to grab a package. A single white paper, folded once and slipped perfectly beneath my door, sat on the threshold. It wasn't handwritten, it was typed. Old school, typewriter style, center-aligned, no greeting, no sign-off. Just 6 words. "You cried in your sleep again." My stomach sank. I hadn't told anyone about the nightmares I'd been having, and I sure as hell hadn't made any noise I was aware of. I brushed it off as some weird coincidence or maybe even a neighbor's mistake, but that wasn't quite right. The paper was new, crisp, like it had been freshly printed or freshly typed. I tried to forget about it, but 3 days later another note appeared. "You didn't finish your chicken." That night I had made lemon pepper chicken and rice. I'd eaten most of it at the kitchen table and dumped the rest in the trash because I lost my appetite halfway through. It was true. I hadn't finished, but I hadn't told anyone. I live alone. My curtains were closed. The only light in the apartment was a small lamp, and yet someone had seen. By the time the third note arrived, I was beyond unsettled. This one said, "You should stop calling her. She won't pick up." That's when it turned personal. The only person I'd been trying to call was my sister. We hadn't spoken since the funeral. I hadn't mentioned it to anyone, and the call logs were private. I started thinking someone had hacked my phone or installed cameras in my apartment. I tore the place apart, looking for hidden lenses or microphones. Nothing. I turned off all my smart devices. I even covered the vents, thinking maybe someone had some strange view through a crack or duct. But no matter what I did, the notes kept coming. One mentioned what shirt I wore to bed. Another described how long I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. One of the most chilling simply said, "You breathe too loud when you're scared." Each one seemed to get closer, not just in detail, but in tone. Whoever was watching me wasn't just observing anymore. They were analyzing. They were learning me. I decided to bring it to the landlord. Barry looked confused at first, then concerned. He insisted there was no one in 4B and hadn't been for months. I asked if I could look inside. At first, he hesitated, but after seeing the notes, he agreed. We walked down the hall together. He fiddled with his keyring, then unlocked the door to 4B. The moment he pushed it open, I felt it a wave of cold, musty air, the kind you only get from a space sealed too long. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no lights, nothing but stale air and a coat of dust thick enough to write in. Every room was bare except for one detail. In the corner of the living room, by the wall shared with my unit, sat a small metal table. On top of it was a typewriter, and beside it a stack of white papers. I stepped closer and recognized the font immediately. It matched every note I'd received. I didn't want to touch anything, but Barry lifted one of the sheets from the stack. His hands were shaking. The top page read, "He's reading this now." I asked him to lock the unit and not let anyone in. He agreed, clearly disturbed, and promised to look into the previous tenant's file. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my living room, all the lights on, staring at the wall we shared with 4B. It felt like I could hear faint clicks, like someone gently tapping metal, but that could have just been my mind playing tricks. I kept telling myself it had to be an elaborate prank, some twisted joke, but I couldn't figure out the purpose. There was no ask, no threat, just observation. The last note came 4 days later. I hadn't left my apartment except for work, and I checked the hallway religiously. Still, it was there one morning, waiting, placed perfectly beneath my door, like always. It was shorter than the others. Just one sentence. "You shouldn't have gone in. That was 2 weeks ago. Since then, I haven't found another note. But now, every night, just past 2 a.m., I wake up gasping, my sheets soaked, the air around me freezing, even though I live in Arizona and the heat is always on. And sometimes, only sometimes, I swear, I can hear a typewriter clacking slowly through the wall. I moved out last weekend. I left the furniture behind. I never went back for the deposit. But I still check my front door every morning. I keep expecting to see another white piece of paper waiting for me. And if I ever do, I don't think I'll be brave enough to open it.